sing the Radha Madhava. I can project it.
You can play harmonium for Jai Radha Madhava? Yes? You can sing in whatever key I pick. Jaya Radha Madhava. No problem? All right.
Very good.
And you're going to get words for her?
Yeah.
You're ready with 2 cameras. Just in case. So there's a nice song that Prabhupada would sing at the beginning of each class. So we're just going to follow what he did. It's very simple. It's 4 lines. And they're just names of Krishna. Each of the names is describing some pastime of Krishna or a quality of Krishna or a relationship of Krishna. Like Yasoda Nandana, Krishna's mother's name is Yashoda, so Yashoda Nandana. Or Krishna lifted the Govardhan hill, Giridharadhari, etc. They're just names of Krishna. Jaya Radha Madhava, Radha and Krishna, like that. So it's the melody is simple, the words are simple, meaning. So the other persons that aren't here, they can see this too?
Yeah, they can see.
Wow, technology.
We're not able to do it from here, so I just logged in from my laptop, but they can see.
Okay. Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjavi Hadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjavi Hadi Gopi Jana Balabha Giridharadhari Gopi Jana Balabha Giridharadhari Yasodanandana Brajajanarandana Yasodanandana Brajajanarandana Jamuna Kiradana Tadi Jamanatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Jaya Radha Madhava Kunjabi Hari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivara Dhari Gopi Jana Balabha Girivara Dhari Jasodhanandana Bhajajanandana Jasodhanandana Bhajajanandana Jamanatira Vanachadi Jamanatira Vanachadi Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Madhava Kunja Jaya Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Kunja Bihari or Premanandi. You expecting others? This is it. Little introduction. Hello? In the 70s in Houston. Ah, ah. Mm, mm. Okay, when if the other person you're expecting shows up, we'll do a little introduction just so they there's some connection. You were young when you first visited the temple. Young. So adventuresome little girl.
Yeah, we were very curious. We were given a lot of brains.
Good, good. The center, the Hare Krishna Center in Houston. Oh yeah, oh yeah, yeah, yeah. But I'm just going to say, it's grown a lot. It's it's grown a lot. Uh-huh. If you ever go back to Houston for some reason or other, visit the Houston temple, and your eyes will go, wow. It's something else now. Something else. So the topic is kind of a blend of different topics. Prematrangani shared with me some of the people that are part of this Friday group from different backgrounds. And, people from different backgrounds may have a little, adjustment challenge or, little discomfort challenge of names and culture and stories and head scratching. Not so much. Anyway, so that was directionally the topic of the culture that goes along with Vedic understanding, ancient Sanskrit texts and the culture that goes with it. So the starting point to enter into that topic is what's coming up in our calendar is a month, very celebrated month of all the other months of the year, is called the month of Damodar. Damodar is a name of a childhood pastime of Krishna when he was very small, toddler, and he engaged in a pastime of breaking a butter pot and feeding the butter to the monkeys. And his mother came and saw him doing these things, and so she didn't mind. Anyway, she attempted to bind Krishna around the waist, and she couldn't. So she got more rope, and she tied the ropes together, tried to bind Krishna. It was still too short. She got more ropes, and it was still too short. She was puzzled, and finally she bound Krishna. So it's a pastime, and there are different parts to it, and it's a very profound exchange of love, motherly love, transcendental motherly love, from Mother Yasoda to Krishna, and Krishna to Mother Yasoda, and the whole thing, the loving exchange between them. It's a very celebrated pastime. And so, with that as a frame of reference, how are people that from different cultures, besides the charm of a sweet exchange between mother and son, how to understand, how to relate to it, the culture of the stories and the names and all that. That's, I'm looking at you, I guess I should be looking at the camera because there's other people out there. Hello, everybody. But I'll look at you anyways. Camera's still there. Huh? Okay, well, you're. I hope you don't feel picked on or something. But just a little sharing. I just spent 7 days conducting a 16-part seminar with devotees from China, speaking in English, translated in Chinese, speaking in English, translated in Chinese. I don't know the number of hours, a lot of hours, 16 parts, describing personalities from another Vedic literature called Ramayana. You've heard of that? Oh, okay, piece of cake. But they hadn't. So the approach that we took, they love to hear. And I love to have discussions with people that like to hear because they always have nice questions and so forth. So the approach was about 2 months ago, before this, it's their national holiday. So ours is the 4th of July, and theirs is declaring independence and Mao, People's Republic of China, and so they celebrate for 7 days, starting October 1 through 7 every year. So I gave a list of personalities that I wanted to speak about, gave a little profile of the characteristics and features and outstanding traits of those personalities, and requested 5, 6 of the well-read devotees, some historical, some literary, and so forth, come up with a little 5 to 7 minute profile on someone from Chinese culture, history, or literature that has some similar characteristics as the Ramayana characters and the Chinese historical persons. So that's where the starting point each class was. Today we're going to speak about something, Hanuman. And boy, they have a lot to say about Hanuman in Chinese culture. This is a digression. We'll come back to the main theme. A very celebrated person in Chinese history was a monk, Buddhist monk, who in the year 600 to 700 AD, from the Tang Dynasty, made a journey overland along the Silk Road, made very, very careful, precise, detailed descriptions, like a diary of his travels, and went to where Buddha appeared in North India, studied there for some number of years, learned Sanskrit, he wanted to know all the Buddhist texts in Sanskrit so he could take it back to China and have it translated, knowing what it means from the super old teacher that was 100 years old. Really, like a really celebrated historical person. Came back, lived until a good old age, and established Buddha's teachings in genuine, because there were like different ideas and different groups, and he gave the real texts. And celebrated person, Xuanzan was his name. So something like 800 years later, someone took that biography of his and put it in a blender along with Ramayana and came up with a book called Journey West, or Journey to the West, something like that. And one of the main characters in Xuanzan's journey to the West was the Sun King, was Hanuman. And and so he traveled with Xuanzan to go to learn Buddhism, and they had encounters with this and that, and something like Ramayana. So they could really relate to that. So now, the culture gap kind of gets shortened because they know the Monkey King, and now they're learning Hanuman, and they see where it fits, etc. This ended just a little while ago. I haven't gotten some kind of feedback yet from those who participated, but I think um, making that cultural connection between what they already know. I mean, I was told everybody that goes to school in China, which is almost everybody, there's 4 required reading books everybody reads, and that's one of them, The Journey West. So being able to connect that Chinese culture and Vedic culture are so similar. They're not identical, but they're so similar. And so I was thinking, because I heard from Prema Tarangani, this Friday group has people from different international backgrounds and different languages and cultures and this and that, now, coming together in a Friday group. Each of us grew up. I grew up in upstate New York. So when I grew up, I heard all about Ichabod Crane and Legend of Sleepy Hollow and those children's stories that were written by someone that lived in upstate New York. Anyway, so, and today it's, Harry Potter, or that whatever the generation is, there's something that young people growing up come to know. So I was thinking specifically, when it took a while for me to learn, Alice in Wonderland and all the other people, and it turns out it's a parody by some British author on people in the British government poking fun at people in the British government. British humor, but it was Alice in Wonderland. So I don't know all those people in the history, but there's some connection for people in England. What are all the names of the books that we all grew up with? And David Copperfield and so many things. Moby Dick. So there's literature that make up the lives of people growing up in any culture. And slowly one becomes familiar with those names and the drama of whatever that story is. And then there's some deeper meaning, like Moby Dick. I studied it twice in high school and then again in college. What's the story behind the big whale? And who's this character and that character? And there's, archetypes of people that teach English literature. Behind the name and the story, it's not exactly a parable. It's a lesson of life, a struggle in the lesson of life. So, we have another guest. So the Vedic culture has histories. They're not fiction. David Copperfield and, Scrooge and the Tale of Christmas, etc. And Ichabod Crane and all, Harry Potter, they're all fictitious people, but there's some kind of a message, etc., etc. In the Vedic texts, there's names that are foreign to us, but after spending some time becoming a little immersed in the stories, the events, like this example, the Damodar Leela. So to you, Mother Jasoda is, just a name. But by hearing and hearing and hearing, it becomes more palpable and becomes quite familiar. And the sweetness of what the story is narrating becomes more profound. And then I think that one of the main points I wanted to make was a very, very, very drastic difference is where your consciousness is taken to. where your consciousness is taken to with Harry Potter or Legend of Sleepy Hollow or Moby Dick, or it doesn't go to that which is the source of everything, and the spiritual connection on a deep spiritual level that we have already with that source of everything. The source of everything being a Supreme Person that from time to time makes himself visible to the world and gives teachings and performs pastimes and loving exchanges. And there's personalities involved in all of that. So there's lessons about loving exchanges and character and quality and the attractiveness of that source of everything. So the result of the literature and the culture of Vedic wisdom is it carries one's consciousness to the Supreme. I think I'll just share a couple more things about this. Go to the Damodar Leela, the Damodar month, because you'll be hearing more about it as we go along, because it's talked about for a whole month, because it's so lovely. There's a science of relationship, or called rasa. You familiar with that term? No. Rasa literally means taste. Like honey has a certain rasa, and salt has a certain rasa, and chili has a certain rasa. So there's a taste in relationships, and there's a science to it. It's science to it, meaning you can explain how things flow in a relationship through explaining rasa, or taste of exchanges. So there's in the course of discussing these topics about Ramayana, some discussion came up about the different relationships between the personalities and their relationship with Ram. And the word rasa came up. And in the audience was an Indian girl who, from the time she was little until she was a teenager, she took classical dance class. And had a classical dance teacher, and the classical dance teacher explained that there's hand gestures. This is now culture. There's hand gestures and movements with the hands and postures when standing or moving. There's a science to dance that awakens a certain mood in the audience. It's designed to bring awake a certain feeling, or rasa, or happiness or sadness or astonishment, or different rasas. So she learned this from a little girl and knows it quite well. And, apparently a proficient dancer as well. But there's a science behind the culture of dancing. There's a science to it. And so we had this discussion, she and I and a few other people that know something about rasa, that what she learned was from an ancient teaching that's grounded in the Vedas, but it was deeply, a life's dedication was given to explaining it through dance by a certain teacher. Bharat Muni was his name. And that's the expression through dance, is to awaken emotion. And ultimately the awakening of emotion in Vedic dance is emotion in relation to Krishna. The culture of dance is very clear expressions of the dance medium to bring attention and affection and feelings, awaken feelings in the audience towards Krishna or Ram or whatever the dance performance is about. The culture is to awaken feelings of love that are dormant. And when those dormant feelings of love are not awakened, then that love is reposed somewhere else. Tendency for love and love of an object or of a person or something in relationships, so that it becomes material because it's of the soul. So if it doesn't come out in the spiritual way, it'll come out in the non-spiritual way because it's of the soul. So the whole of Vedic culture is to take that soul tendency and elevate it or move it or direct it towards transcendence. There's a science, and there's lower modes of nature, ignorance, passion, towards goodness, and then beyond goodness. So that you can learn, or anyone can learn, in Bhagavad Gita, modes of nature, and the literature. So along with dance, there's music, there's architecture, there's etc., etc. Expressions of culture, sociology, architecture, medicine, etc., etc., etc. All of the Vedas have different branches, but there's one purpose of all those different branches: to draw attention and affection to the source of everything. And it's, if one is not born in India, many of us are not born in India, culturally it's a little, there's some adjusting, but the spirit of, now go back to these devotees from China, the Ramayana is not available in Chinese. They don't know anything about it. I mean, a little bit here, a little bit there, but when it's presented in a way that's culturally relatable, like at least we attempted to do that, then the attention gets carried not just to Xuanzang and his trip that everybody knows about, to go to Buddha's place of birth and hear the teachings of Buddha and back again into his story, but it takes one to that which is the source of everything, not just a cultural, historical personality. Long, long ago, there was somebody that did something, but it draws one's attention to the source of everything. So it does take some time. It took me some time. It took me some time going through Bhagavad Gita to get to learn people's names. Chapter 1 was like, I just didn't read chapter 1. It was too confusing about names. It didn't seem like essential anyways, because the teaching starts later anyways. But by hearing, hello, we're glad you can come. We're halfway through. A little recap, just so you're up to speed with what we're doing. You were hearing on the way? No. Were you able to hear along the way as you were approaching, or should I do a little mini summary? Okay. No problem. No. You're giving me an opportunity to do a mini summary. Okay. The overall topic is culture arising from this ancient wisdom of the Vedas, the Vedic texts, and the culture that's connected with it. And it's a little uncomfortable when you're, like I was, and you are, born not in India, to start hearing names and, social things, and, it's like, it takes a little while to get accustomed to it. But as I was trying to explain, several things. One of them is the names are not so important. The mood that's being conveyed through the activities within those literatures is important. Specifically, I was explaining, it is intended to carry one's attention to the source of everything, to elevate to a place of higher consciousness, which literatures from this culture, that culture, the other culture don't do. I was using the example of the last 7 days I was with Chinese devotees. It wasn't Zoom, it was VooV. And so there were 300 people on the attending the classes, hearing something they'd never heard before about people in Ramayana. But we started with characters from China, literature, history, or culture that everybody knows, and 5 to 7 minutes speaking about those persons that resemble the personalities in Ramayana. So the cultural gap was a little bit bridged, and they could listen to the narration, connecting with the personality, and that hearing of the personality 16 times over was carrying them to Ram, the affection of a relationship with Ram. And in some cases, you know, the good guys and the bad guys that were trying to do bad things, kidnap Ram's Sita and abducted her, and, you know, etc., etc., was threatening her, and it was so the good guys and the bad guys. So people from Chinese culture that resembled the bad guy, Ravana, and so forth and so on. So cultural differences are there, but they're not so big because personalities are quite similar in all cultures over a period of time. So getting over the names and the flow of events connected with those personalities, the essence of Vedic culture is to carry one to awakening a dormant affection for the source of everything. And that source of everything is the person, and the person has loving qualities, very adorable exchanges with loving devotees, and it's very heartwarming and attractive. It moves one to tears to hear and remember these activities. It's not the same. So when you walked in, we were discussing those same emotions exist if the object is not the Supreme Person. If the Supreme Person is forgotten, then those objects are going to be some other thing. And there are going to be feelings reposed on some other object or some other person or some other thing, attachment to a thing or attachment to a person. But those attachments to those things or persons don't carry one to a higher consciousness. They keep one in, according to Bhagavad Gita's teachings and Srimad Bhagavatam's teachings, they keep one in the material field, birth after birth. So the means of relieving one from the cycle of birth and death, and in between old age and disease, and the unwanted parts of material life, relief from that is made by drawing attention. The culture of Vedic literature is to draw one's attention to transcendence. The names and exchanges and things have some differences. And so there are, in that realm of higher consciousness, there are powers or mystic powers that beings of higher consciousness have that we don't have. And so when we read about powers of higher conscious beings, some persons in lower consciousness may go, what? Like, you know, it's mythology. It's a story meant to tell us something, but we don't take the story for a fact because it's beyond our experience of higher consciousness. But there are beings with higher consciousness and beings with higher powers than us, and so the story matches their consciousness and their higher powers. And that's a bit of a stretch if one's consciousness is down here and consciousness is not up there, hearing the story and going, But as purification goes on, then a little realization of different aspects. It's compared to the rising of the sun from darkness until pre-dawn, twilight, and then the sun rises, and then the sun. So when the sun comes up, one can see things that one couldn't see before the sun came up. Similarly, awakening of higher consciousness through Vedic culture it's a gradual process. It's not an on and off switch. It's a gradual process like the rising of the sun. And one other thing I thought I would share, and then we'll see if there's some discussion. The Vedas have different parts. The Vedas, by Veda means knowledge, books of knowledge. And the books of knowledge are compared to a desire tree. So living human form of life, all forms of life, but in the human form of life particularly, there's capacity to develop knowledge of how to address and take care of our needs. Physical needs, emotional needs, and all of our needs. So the Vedas are providing the means to do that in such a way it elevates consciousness. Not just fulfill your needs, but elevate consciousness in the course of fulfilling needs. So it's compared to a desire tree. You go to most trees, let's say mango tree, it supplies mangoes in season. And otherwise it doesn't supply other fruits, and it's only in season. That's normal tree. But the Vedas is like a tree that supplies all things at any time. And there are procedures within the Vedas for fulfilling necessities, human necessities, social, physical, emotional, medical, etc. And so there's sections of the Vedas that address how to take care of all your needs. At the same time, elevate consciousness. And then there's what's called the ripened fruit of all Vedic knowledge, and that's where is it all taking you? It's that place of higher consciousness. So within all of that, the Vedas, there's a philosophical, you can perhaps say skeletal. It's there's philosophical portions of the Vedas, and some persons that may not have the capacity to understand that philosophical portion of the Vedas, there's explanatory sections that explains the philosophy. So the histories are embellishing or giving examples of the teachings. So within the histories, embedded within the histories, there's teachings, kind of like the example I was giving before. I use Moby Dick because I learned it in high school and had to study it again in college, in English course. So Moby Dick is a story about something, and then the people that teach Moby Dick say, the whale means something, and the captain means something, and the other characters mean something, and it's something about, you're learning something about life through the story of a whale. Similarly, as with English literature or other cultures, within the Vedas, there's a teaching along with these interesting histories. The histories carry one to this place of higher consciousness, but how the whole thing fits together, that teaching is also there fleshed out by the stories. So through the guidance of teachers, one can learn what's the philosophy behind the different stories. So that's little sharing on this question of persons that have grown up not in India, like I didn't, and presumably you also didn't. That how does the cultural gap between what we've grown up with and are familiar with, and then this other literature and wisdom and culture, and how do you bridge the gap between the two? So I'm just trying to point out some of the different features or elements of that culture. The intent overall, one more time, is elevation of consciousness from the lower modes to the higher modes of nature. And how does it work? How do the puzzle pieces fit together? And when done nicely or under proper guidance, etc., then this subjectively there's an experience of higher consciousness, not just like learning the Harry Potter story or something. I didn't read Harry Potter, but I asked somebody who did read Harry Potter. There's probably, in the last volume of Harry Potter, there's probably the mystery solved. And I was told, yeah, what's the mystery solved? And the mystery solved, I was told, I don't know if it's true, is the soul splits. One soul becomes two souls. Well, that's an interesting conclusion. But according to Bhagavad Gita, it's not so. Souls don't split. But the whole Harry Potter story is built around, at least the punchline is, one soul went over here, the same soul went over there, and there's two different people, and that's why there's chaos and tension and stuff. So Vedic histories or stories have a very fascinating storyline, a loving storyline, and there's some challenges and some good guys and bad guys too, but it takes one consciousness to what the human form of life is meant to achieve. Like this example of rasa with classical dance, how to stir the emotion of the audience through dance performance so that they feel feelings, and ultimately they can feel those feelings in relation to the Supreme Person. That's the intention of that particular cultural expression. And similarly, all the other cultural expressions have that intention. And it's effective. So the starting point was the month of Damodar. I'm looking at you because you were here before. Coming up in a little while is a month that all over the world, not just Hare Krishna devotees, but devotees of Krishna celebrate for a whole month because of its special charm. The month of Damodar. The Damodar month is centering around Krishna as a little boy in his pastimes, being naughty, breaking butter pots and feeding monkeys with the butter and this and that. And Mother Yasoda catches him in the act, and she wants to reprimand him because if he grows up and becomes a thief, that's not good. So her motherly instinct says, I want to put a rope around your waist. So she can't put the rope around his waist. So she uses her reasoning faculty and gets more rope and ties ropes together and still won't go around his waist. He's a little boy. Anyway, and finally she can bind him. And so the lesson is he's not bound by ropes, but by her affection. There's many other things in that whole pastime, but it's the affection of sub, uh, supreme motherly love, because motherly love is natural for any mother, and Mother Jasoda has love for Krishna as the supreme person. So there's many other parts to that pastime. So how do we Western-born people relate to? It's a nice story, motherly love. That's nice. It's more than that, and to gradually, like the sun rising, get a sense of what's happening here. Why is so many millions of people fascinated by this story of motherly love? It's not just about motherly love, it's about transcendence. And taking a natural love that's of this world and elevating it to an otherworldly kind of love. And because there's other relationships, there's Krishna's with his friends, and they're watching the whole thing, and there's other relationships going on. And then his father comes and sees Krishna bound around the waist. It's a whole other set of things that start to happen. Krishna pulls over 2 trees because the rope is being tied to a grinding mortar for spices. And then 2 trees fall over, and 2 celestial beings come out of the trees and offer their prayers to Krishna. It's just a long story. But so it's charming. But there's lessons about loving exchanges in different ways with Krishna, who's the source of everything. Now that's specific to the month of Damodar, and I'm sure you'll hear more and probably want to understand it better than I just explained it, because it's profound. That's part of the topic. Getting accustomed, because of our upbringing, to a culture that's we're not accustomed to, and to some degree, to at least some degree, there's some faith that it's safe, and it's going to be wholesome and good for me, and I want to understand it better. So those are some attempts to try to share about that. I was really, just honestly, and I said to the Chinese devotees, I don't know how this is going to work, because you're really unfamiliar with this whole story. And I'm going to not like narrate the story, but I'm speaking about the personalities. And you don't know the personalities. And then the personalities have people they're related to. And like, I'm not sure how it's going to work. But it worked. At least the feedback so far. Because in one sense, these are archetypical personalities, types, and they did things. But because the audience I was speaking to wasn't just totally new people. They're persons that are already, in some way or another, practicing bhakti. And there's a whole other set of stories about Lord Ramachandra they don't know. They know about Krishna stories more, and less about Lord Ram's stories. So the cultural gap was there, but the cultural gap got bridged a bit, I think. So let's see. I don't know if I accomplished what I was trying to accomplish. See if there's some discussion. And you have some people online as well, yeah? Okay. Since you two are both in the room, anything from either of you on what you've heard, and some thoughts or comments?
One thought, one question is,
how we're the uh, ice. How can I put? I all along from the time my introduction in the 70s, my I, the edict was only Vedic literature is valid, and it's the only valid pastime for any of us. And so there was so much in the world to see and learn that I couldn't accept that. So is that's my first emotional reaction, is that how could that be the only valid pastime? Then separately, I'm thinking we have some young people here who are from an Indian family background but being brought up in America. So they have a kind of different maybe
Perspective.
on the change of, or the exchange of culture. And I'm curious what you would recommend for these young people. And how she or they manage.
And, the culture that I grew up in was like this. Is that really what I want to be part of? Do I accept it? Is it me? Is some part of it maybe? Maybe some parts of it are not me. No problem at all. And a lot depends on the person, depends on, and without that good association, in the absence of good association, or the opposite, some unwholesome association, the ride is more difficult. Now back to the first one, which was, my impression, there's two things. My impression is what you encountered in the 70s was overzealousness. Besides some people, I'm making more of a comment than some people. It's kind of in a new entity. It's understandable that they're going to be a little extreme. There's a Sanskrit phrase, utsahamayi. I mean, it's natural. It's an immature stage. I'm going for it, so I'm rejecting other things. It's immaturity. Now, on the other hand, there is. It's not that a more mature picture is let's say respecting differences of people that have different values and different views and different ideologies and different things, and they have some access to divinity that we don't have a exclusive franchise to divinity. At the same time, there are, even within those who have some sense of divinity, there's degrees of less complete, more complete, and really complete understandings of divinity. Even within Vedic texts. Let's say pantheism, seeing God within nature. God's within nature. And is there further understanding of God besides God's within nature? Yes. There's nothing wrong with God is within nature. He is. And then more complete and more complete and more complete. And so forth. I just on a personal level, I grew up in a Christian family, and as with many religious cultures, when you turn a teenage, something you did when you were little, you do it again, like baptism, and then Christianity is confirmation class, or something in Judaism, then bas mitzvah and bar mitzvah. and so on. So for Vedic culture, it's Upanayana is a step a young boy will take to receive mantra from Guru and so forth. So in my case, it was confirmation class. So a group of us teenagers got together and we had a confirmation class and it went for 6 months. And the topic was, we were asked to discuss amongst ourselves, should there be capital punishment or not? And the conclusion was, we don't know. I mean, some people thought they knew this way, some people, but, more honest answer is we don't know. And some time passed, and the Vedic texts give a very clear answer, is what I just said. There's degrees of understanding God and transcendence and the absolute truth and the source of all things. There's not an exclusive franchise on it over here. It's all over the place. And then, but it's not an ism. It's truth. And truth can be understood with brighter intensity or more completely or less completely. Your thoughts?
I'm thinking for the layman, the layperson, if you read some piece of literature, maybe any piece of literature they assign in high school. I mean, like if you read, I haven't read Harry Potter, I haven't even seen the movie, I've heard about it. So if you read Harry Potter and you got certain life lessons that could be helpful to you along the way, but then you get to the crux of it, it's like, okay. No, but does that invalidate any life lesson you might get from
No.
whatever kindness
But
or whatever thing they might teach?
my message was not in the application of that value towards what end?
During time, so it's time to go. That's my cynic. Sorry, young people.
That's okay. That's okay. That's okay. That's okay.
That's the cynic's answer.
The Vedic culture, back to the theme of what I was saying, it's whether it's literature or dance or music or architecture or whatever, there's one objective, or medicine or anything. What's the source of everything and connecting with that source of everything? To the degree that value or life lesson fulfills that, it carries greater value for you and for those who you come in contact with, because then you can become an instrument for that connection, because you're not just wise or you have life lessons, you're connected to that source of everything, and your life and the way that you speak and the way that you do is going to help people become more connected to that source. You become an instrument for the well-being of the people around you in the world. That's the Vedic picture, wherever it's coming from, whatever the sources are and however you gather it.
I don't recall. I was very isolated. Not isolated. I would go into downtown Pittsburgh and swim and things like that. But my parents did. I was raised as a Presbyterian. And,
Me too.
But okay, which some people call a vanilla religion.
Whatever.
But anyway, but what was interesting was the focus with my family wasn't so much on religion or spirituality. It was on being good.
Yeah.
And great principles about working hard
Yeah.
being good, but there was this big focus on swimming. And my dad made me. My dad, it was like that was the thing we had to do. I had to swim like every day for like hours. It was like to him that was discipline, and that discipline would spread out to all corners of my life, which was kind of true, but kind of not. It did discipline me, except in the area of like spirituality. And so I was always like, I remember being really young and going, I would go to church and I'm like, there's something missing. Like I got it, kind of, but the connection wasn't there.
Yeah.
And I was always thinking about it, but it wasn't. And I was very young. And then, I went through my teenage years. And, as a teenager, you're like trying to see what's up and down, and
Yeah.
all around, right?
Yeah,
And
yeah.
there's so many things you're going through. But as I've gone through my life path, I've belonged to different organizations and spiritual groups. And slowly the seeds have been laid. I mean, I belonged to, I was practicing a certain type of yoga where you would yoke with the spirit, and that really kind of changed my life a little bit. That was about 11 years ago. But I still didn't understand like the teachings that you're talking about, the Vedic literature. And like, as I progress, I've been like learning about Krishna consciousness for less than 2 years, but all these light bulbs are going off. It's like, wow, this is real. This is the truth. Like I feel at home. And it's that connection. I mean, there's so much I have to learn. Like you told the story. Every time I hear these little stories, I learn something else, and I'm like, whoa. And they're such simple stories, but then all of a sudden your heart feels like it's going to explode. And I feel so much peace. So it's really beautiful. Thank you. I mean, I have so much to learn, but wow.
Two things you said. Yeah, yeah. And half our time was there, and we went to another place. So at the end, there was a group of about 35 Chinese devotees that had never, been to India before. A couple of them been to India, so it's like a totally new. And so I said, what was your experience like? The young girl, not married yet, maybe, 20, 21, bright, articulate, said a few things. What her best experience was, and to take home for her is, I am now feeling that I want to find my home. And, because visiting in China, I have a clear understanding that the people in China are taught and are very nationalistic. It's pounded and pounded and pounded and pounded nationalism. Fine. She just went out of that space, and I want to find my home. And I feel very much at home here. It's like tears were coming to my eyes because she was very new. She didn't know much of anything. Nice, bright, young lady. And she's continuing to practice and exploring, and she's busy with her life because she's a young person finding out who she is and what she wants to do. But Krishna's at the center, and it resonates. So, from all kinds of different backgrounds, is one of the main points, because I understood that people, maybe the online people are from other countries or something, if they would like to participate in this discussion, but it's the home sense and resonating sense. The other part I wanted to share is, as I went on with, very similar upbringing as yours. And I didn't go swimming every day, but we lived by a lake. We lived by a lake. I probably spent as much time in the water as I did on land, because it was a really nice lake. It was my childhood. Different. He was a treasurer for the church.
Yeah, same as my dad. There we go.
And taught Sunday school, and I was so I was an apprentice helping the Sunday school teachers teach the little kids, and service minded, all that. But the picture of what is a life of spirituality was not clear. As soon as you leave the church, it's go off to the the golf course and play golf. And etc. So, secularism, the integration. This isn't like, it's not a judgment. It's just there's levels of connecting with God, and there's deeper levels of connecting with God that I was eager for and didn't get any answers to because they didn't have them. And when you find them, the lights go on. That was another thing that you said that I was connected with. So our online people, do we have online questions in the chat box or whatever they do?
When raising kids around the bhakti practice, what are some things that a parent should keep in mind not to push their kids, and understanding when to back off and let them choose and decide for themselves, even when they're quite young?
I would say most of the time. I mean, parenting is a topic that seems to have no end. Whenever I get involved in the parenting topic, it just goes on and on and on. But parenting doesn't mean it doesn't mean control. It means creating an atmosphere, being a good example, finding out what propensities the child has, nourish those propensities, whether if it's art or if it's music or if it's whatever it is, science and math, okay, great. And nourish propensities, be of good character, create a spiritual atmosphere in the home by example and by doing things together. Have fun together, but in the spiritual side. And don't push. Because you may get a behavior when the child is younger, and then you're going to get a pushback when they're a little older. Because there's some resentment that they were pushed. I mean, not always, but it's good chance. So you encourage and give some, there has to be some boundaries, like don't jump out the window, or some things that you just children are understand. We don't go run across the street in the traffic. There's some things that are just dangerous we don't do. And recognizing here's a spirit soul that God, Krishna, has entrusted us to care for. We want to create the best opportunity, but they're also making choices based upon their previous lives and this life and their current association. So try to create good association, even if it's not proximate. Proximate is best, but some good association. So wholesomeness has its support. And allow the decisions to be made. I'm thinking, hearing this type of question, I'm thinking of course, everybody's different, but I remember one teenager was shared with me privately. I really like everything except chanting. I like this and that, this and that. But chanting is really tough. So there was not like, what? Chanting is, it's just, well, do all the things that you like. And the time will come when you'll have some taste for chanting. That devotee is now a mother of 2 children and is an initiated devotee and is, a lovely person. So it came about by nature's arrangement, or the sun came up a little bit more, and they decided, no, I want to do this, and they found some taste, and so they did more, and it happened in a natural way rather than this question of pushing, or you can encourage, but don't push. That's a short answer. More on that? No? Do we have online something from others? Okay. Do you want to add to this question that she asked? The challenge of growing up in an Indian family and looking at the world that's not all Indian around you anymore, and huh? What? She can speak. Give her the microphone.
Basically about your point about
How old are you now?
13.
13, the magic number.
So basically, like how you said about being an Indian but living like here. Sometimes I feel like it's harder as I grow older. Like when I was younger, it was like I didn't really care that much. But like when you're older, it's like different because it's like you have like 2 separate identities. Kind of like you go to public school and like you're with like other non-devotees.
Speak slower.
Okay.
Young
Right.
people speak really fast.
So I was saying like it sometimes feels like you have 2 identities. Like you go to public school and you're like with other people who are not devotees, and then you're like their life is like very Krishna conscious, and like you're with devotees. So I feel like sometimes it's hard to like blend those together, but I guess it's just like a gradual process. And yeah.
Do you feel that you're able to, even today, draw upon that youthful enthusiasm and the really good association that you had when you were younger in the Lachua?
Yeah.
Is that a strength that you're able to draw upon today?
Yeah, definitely. Like that foundation that I had when I was younger helps me even now.
So is it more than like a fond memory, and it becomes more of like a value that you adhere to because you feel that strength from that past association and that period of your life?
Yeah, like what I learned then, that those impressions, like maybe when I was younger I didn't use it in my life that much, but like now it's like still there with me, so it like helps, to make decisions. Or
It was your question. And different young people are going to express themselves in a different way. That's her. And she may say to her friends a little more frankly than she would in a forum like this. Okay. There's a nice verse in the Bhagavatam that speaks, just to keep it in simple language, there are duties in life variegated duties in life, and the measure of having them really achieve the human mission is attachment to the personality of Godhead, attachment to the topics of the personality of Godhead, and thus attachment to the personality of Godhead. One of the images that I like and use when I speak to college kids, because they're in this flexible space, the iceberg metaphor, it goes like this. There's the tip of the iceberg, and there's what's below the surface of the water, and then there's the bottom of the iceberg. So the tip of the iceberg is behaviors and observable things that make up what you do, culture. And then below the surface of the water is values, and values drive behaviors, but also behaviors also can modify values. So there's an interplay and a connection. But the bottom of the iceberg is the unchanging, non-circumstantial truths about life that don't change. Values may change, behaviors may change, and there's some truths about life that don't change. So Vedic culture is meant to align all those things. So you can get values and you get behaviors that are wholesome from all kinds of sources. And then to help keep them moving progressively or in good alignment is with truths of life that are unchanging, like souls don't divide, or there's a source. There's not multiple sources of everything. So there's just truths about life. There's something, whatever that something is, that's by Vedic definition, that's what the absolute truth is, and life is meant to connect with that absolute truth, that which is the source of everything. Progressive life is meant to achieve that. So then let me align my values, and let me align my behaviors and speech with that. That's another way of saying what I was trying to say about Vedic culture. And back to your question, can you receive truths or experiences of life and things that are going to help you from other than these Vedic texts? Of course, absolutely. And they'll be ultimately beneficial for you to the degree that they're helping to align you with that absolute truth. And then there's the human error part. We make mistakes and we're subject to illusion and so forth. Basic defects of a conditioned soul. So best to get that wisdom from a source that doesn't have those defects. And that source is God, because he doesn't have those defects. So how are you going to get wisdom from God? That's what religion says. Well, this way, that way. Okay. There's not one channel, but there are principles involved. And that's study of Bhagavad Gita helps one, I find. Okay, so I think we're ready to wrap it up. Anything from you over there? Vrindavan?
Hare Krishna Maharaj. Yesterday someone asked me through online in a chat window, is Shankaracharya, because that person is into Krishna consciousness but also hearing from some other sources.
Okay.
And some other sources are criticizing Prabhupada because he's not agreeing with the Mayavadis. So she had this question that is Shankaracharya a Mayavadi, or is he a good person but I have heard from you, so I gave the answer that he is not Mayavadi, but he has a service to uh, propagate this. So how do
Yeah.
so
I mean,
if
there are different ways of answering that question. And one way is what you just said. He came into this world at Krishna's request to do a certain thing and to give a certain teaching, which he did. In the conclusion, Narayana Parovyaktat, the personality of Godhead is beyond the temporary, which is not a Mayavad conclusion. Bhajagovinda, Bhajagovinda, Bhajagovinda Mudad Mate. Then the end is, what good will all of your word jugglery do you? You won't reach the conclusion of the source of everything by that method, which is the method that he introduced. So, was he? No, but he was doing a service, just like Buddha. He was doing a service. He's an incarnation of Krishna, according to the Bhagavatam. The Bhagavatam indicates, you know this, so I'm saying it's for the benefit of the others here. Even before Buddha came, the Bhagavatam said, guess what? He's going to come. And it gave where, his mother's name, and what his program would be. And he didn't teach theism. He didn't teach against theism. He just didn't teach theism. He taught nonviolence. And, cessation of violence and cessation of material desire. That's what he taught. There's details, of course. So, what's going on? He did a service on behalf of the Supreme Lord. He's an incarnation of the Supreme Lord. So, how do we regard him? We regard him as an incarnation of the Supreme Lord who came with a certain message, according to time, place, and circumstance, to stop people from animal slaughter. So back to your friend's question. I think you gave a simple answer. You can do a little research and go through the history that's in the Vedas of Lord Shiva being asked by the personality of Godhead to descend during this age and do what he did. So he did. It was a service. Do the research, find the scriptural reference so your friend can understand. You're not just talking. Here's the scriptural reference that says it. Okay?
One more. So there was a slight discussion about the Buddha too.
He asked the same question?
She did not have the link between Buddha but she asked what is Buddhism, how it is different from Mayavada philosophy. And if you could elaborate on why Shankaracharya brought Mayavada philosophy to bring people back to Vedas, not the original.
This is a detailed professor question. And I don't mind answering your question, but I don't know if the context is right for answering your question.
It's up to you, Maharaj. You can.
I'm also. You want to hear?
Me too.
Yeah. So another time I'll be happy to answer your question. In fact, I did some research. In fact, somebody that can help you even because of time constraints. Nandi Mukhi Nandi Mukhi is from China. She has a PhD and graduated from George Mason. And she's living in the Baltimore area now. Jiva Goswami writes in Tattva Sandarbha on this topic. So so I gathered some research, gave it to her. She's done some more research. She's got it down. She's got the PhD answer to your question. the short of it is, Buddha taught nirvana, which means cessation of material activity, and then there's beyond nirvana. Shankara taught what's beyond nirvana is Brahman. Cessation of material existence has a spiritual existence. Buddha didn't teach spiritual existence. He taught cessation of material existence, and that's enlightenment or nirvana. The language is different, but the conception of Brahman is a positive existence that Buddha didn't teach. Buddha taught void, nirvana. And on the other side of void is what? On the other side of cessation of material existence is what? Brahman, existence, Sat. So, go to her. Okay?
Thank you, Maharaj.
She has one back in the corner, and that's it.
Do you have any question?
No, she's smiling.
Okay. Maharaj, being a parent for 14 years, now I feel it's difficult to practice detachment. So I would like
You find it difficult to do what?
to practice detachment.
Detachment.
Yes. Because I find it now it's time for me to to
Let go.
detach myself from what I was doing before. So I would like to know what is the best way for me to practice detachment.
Attachment is the best way.
Okay.
Attachment to transcendence is the best way to practice detachment from the temporary. You know that from Bhagavad Gita, chapter
But
5.
It's very hard.
Okay, well, you asked for it. You wanted to be a mother. But it's part of the when someone is not yet, birds and beasts produce offspring. The humans can also produce offspring. And what separates human life from birds and beasts is higher consciousness. So you're very fortunate you've been provided the higher consciousness path where becoming a mother, and now and you're also equipped with tools for higher consciousness, and you're saying, yeah, but it's not easy. Well, it's not meant to be easy, it's meant to be progressive. Higher consciousness is something that you invest in. And it's for your benefit and for the benefit of those, as this instrument message, those you're in contact with, starting within your immediate family. Be kind to your teenage daughter and let her find herself. And, if you create that kind of an atmosphere that's not an attached mother atmosphere, but the loving mother atmosphere, then it'll make it easier for her to confide in you and take resource from you and grow in her own way. And it's not going to be easy for her, it's not going to be easy for you, but that the attachment to transcendence brings detachment from the temporary, and you have the path. You're way ahead of the game for people that don't have that. Lots of people produce children and they don't have that spiritual connection, like we were just discussing. I mean, not that people don't want it, but just palpably have it and feel it, and you take shelter there. And that's where the detachment comes. Detachment doesn't mean, okay, now I don't care anymore. That's not what it means. The discrimination is coming from a higher consciousness place because of attached to transcendence, attached to the Supreme. And then you can be more, act more appropriately in the world around you, not just your daughter, but the world around you. You'll be a better instrument, and you'll do better for yourself. So attachment to transcendence, attachment to Krishna. And you practice that, you cultivate that, take shelter. Starts with the quality of how you chant the mantra, your mantra meditation every day, how absorbed your consciousness is in that sound. Very simple. Maybe too simple. Okay. So we're finished for the evening. 8:15. You okay? You're looking at like you're not okay. You okay? Okay. Thank you. Hare Krishna.